Well, I just got a phone call telling me there was been a death in the family, so not a. Hmm. Any rate, I had said that I would talk in my next video about how the Pont language is intended to deal with some of the issues surrounding learning a language and languages sharing information with each other. I'm going to go ahead and do that. The Pont language is, again, its main dialect is based on Esperanto, um, based very much on Esperanto. As a matter of fact, aside from the difference in spelling and the lack of a bias toward one gender over the other, it's very difficult to tell them apart right now at the main dialect level. Now, it is unique in the fact that unlike other languages which have dialects that develop accidentally, or in the case of Esperanto, or other languages which were invented for the purpose of having a language to do certain things or to serve certain purposes, they tend to start out with only one dialect, and eventually dialects do tend to creep in haphazardly. Again, uh, in the case of Pont, it is designed from the ground up to be a plethora of dialects. Unlike other languages, the idea behind Pont is to absorb other languages not into a single dialect, but each into their own dialect. So, for example, where um, English and Spanish come together here in Los Angeles, where I live, a lot of people end up mixing the two and speaking a mixture. I can go to one place and hear in the same day, in the same hour, one kid tell his parents, "Dame un servilleta, please." Another kid says, "Dame un napkin, por favor," and another kid says, "Could you hand me a servilleta, please?" And they're sentences that are entirely in one language except for a single word from the other language. Sometimes people will mix the languages to the point where they're two or three words from one language and the rest is in the other one, or pretty close to half and half. They call these things various names like Spanglish and um, Espanol and Spanglish and stuff like that. And they're not official, to my knowledge. They are haphazard mixtures of English and Spanish, usually either going by the grammatical rules of English or going by the grammatical rules of Spanish at any given time. Now, that's not to say that the person speaking it will consistently stay in the rules of one of the two languages over the other. And sometimes you get children who grew up in a household where the parents spoke a pidgin mixture of English and Spanish without grammar, and their own brains will interject a mixed grammar between English and Spanish from what they hear people speaking in English, what they hear people speaking in Spanish, and their own ideas of what seems to make sense. So they end up speaking a Creole English Spanish mixture, which has its own grammar. It's not English grammar, it's not Spanish grammar, and yet these same children generally also learn to speak fluent English and fluent Spanish, because they even if there's no separate English and Spanish spoken in the household, which usually there is, but even if there's not, they will run into these things elsewhere, and as children, they tend to learn them very quickly. Now, adults don't learn languages as quickly. So, what happens if an adult has been exposed to only one language, or nearly only to one language for the vast majority of their life, and a decision is made to learn another language. How are they supposed to do that when adult brains don't grow quickly enough to grow the parts to process the language as rapidly as a child would? And when they have thousands of words to learn and jobs to attend to and lives to live, uh, unlike children who go to school to learn things, um, in what otherwise would be a lot of their free time and still have free time left over. Adults usually don't have such luxuries. They have a lot of responsibilities. So here's where something like Pont comes in. The Pont language is designed to have a dialect for each language. Now, I'm not going to make all of the dialects myself. I'm not qualified. I have studied quite a few languages over the years on my own. Most of it is probably all but forgotten, if not completely forgotten, because I haven't had the opportunity to use it. And I have always had an interest in learning multiple languages. Now, if nobody else uses Pont, that's a shame, but I still will because I recognize the value of it as something that can increase the capacity to learn other languages, even if nothing else, just through the use of it as an exercise, as a brain exercise, to help the brain to grow the language centers of your brain, to grow the language centers more capability, or give them more functionality in linguistics. And not exactly saying that clearly, am I? Okay, mental calisthenics. Let me give an example. Here is level 0 of Pont English dialect. Level 0 is practically English. It's a bit like Pig Latin. I am now speaking in the level zero English dialect of Pont. It's not difficult for and English speaker to understand but it probably sounds rather funny as a matter as a matter matter of fact sorry it is slightly more difficult than it might sound and that difficulty is reason enough to think that it may be exercise for the brain. However, notice that when you write words spaces are put between the words whereas when you speak gaps between the words are usually avoided. However, we do know where each word ends if we think about it this exercise helps to reinforce being able to quickly identify the end of each word in level 1 things get a little more complicated however it is not as necessary to put out the ending on every word I will attempt to demonstrate that in my next video. Now, if you didn't understand that, go back and listen to it again because it's basically English. So if English is your first language, you probably will understand it. If it's not your first language, it may be more difficult. But all I did was put the syllable ow, spelled apostrophe AW, on the end of every word. It's a very simple exercise. This is level 0 of the English dialect of Pont. The Spanish dialect of Pont, level 0, you do the same thing. You put apostrophe AW pronounced ow on the end of every word, and it doesn't matter what the phonetics of the language are. Okay.